Should you focus on search engine optimization and search engine marketing over social media? I can't believe wait a minute. Yes, I can believe. Absolutely, most of you should. I believe that sustainably minded marketers should focus on an SEO-first strategy, especially in a social media obsessed world like we're in right now. I want you to forego the influencer model. I don't even have to hedge my bets with that "it depends" that a lawyer might say or that I would say on other episodes. I will say this to you as a micro or small business listening to this. Dollar for dollar, an investment in search engine optimization and search engine marketing, that's SEO and SEM, makes better sense for your business unless you've already built a substantial and very engaged social media audience. And if you have built it, it also might still make better sense. We just need to look at it a little bit differently. Why? Because of this statistic, 53% of all trackable website traffic comes from organic search, according to BrightEdge in 2020. And only 5% of all trackable traffic comes from social media. That's a really clear and distinct difference. And I don't understand why we get confused about this. I think, I'm not going to say we don't understand. I think I do understand. A lot of websites don't really work like a salesperson the way that they should. We think of our website kind of like an online brochure instead of a salesperson for our business, which is what it really is or should be. And so we struggle sometimes to understand the value of our website coming up in a search. Whereas in social media, as small and micro businesses, we're often showing up as ourselves, writing intimate posts or making videos. And so we're showing up as that primary brand ambassador, that primary salesperson for our company. And so we don't understand that the reason why social media may be bringing in more sales than search is a misalignment in the way we have set up our structures, not because social media is actually more efficient or works better. Now, I want to give you a caveat here as we're thinking about search versus social. I want you to stop and think about what you're building, because what you're building matters a lot. If your model is to be an influencer and not just like sell to brands as an influencer online, get paid to market brands, but to be an influencer in thought leadership or something like that, social media probably makes sense for your brand. The problem is, particularly when what we're trying to build are companies and when we're trying to sell things. So let me present it to you this way. Think about social media as a brand building tool primarily, and as a thought leadership building tool primarily, and your website as a salesperson, and it does the other things too, but for your business, it's the most efficient online salesperson that you could have. So here's what happens with social media. It has its place, and I don't believe that you should just quit all social media or not do anything there. What I see over and over and over with my clients is they're putting 5, 10, 15 times as much effort into social media as they're putting into search. And so they always feel like they're on a hamster wheel. So if you're an author or a journalist or an influencer, you're in that social media world because people want to know your opinion and what you think about things, and it's really powerful. But if you're a business, even if the business is behind an author or a speaker or an influencer, the business runs most efficiently when your marketing systems run like clockwork in a sustainable fashion. And that doesn't happen from a social media standpoint. From a social media standpoint, you always have to be producing content in order for that content to have payoff. That's not true about search. In search, you can produce content once and it will build and build and build in value over time if you handle it right. So one of my questions when I'm talking to clients about search or social is, what are you building? Now, I want to be 150% clear. I'm not saying that this is a zero-sum search or social. I'm saying that just like we talked about over the last few episodes, that I want to compel you to strongly consider putting copy first. I want you in a 2021 world to strongly consider putting search as a higher priority for your marketing budget, time, and intentionality than social media, unless you've already built a substantial and very engaged audience. And then there may be some more splitting of that a little bit instead of primary focus. Because search builds in value over time. And as a business person, that's what you want. Search gets easier to execute over time. And as a business person, that's what you want. Search is easier to create sustainable models from. And as a business person, that's what you want. Social media is media and networking. Meaning, yes, you will get better over time. Yes, you will build audience over time, potentially. And it requires a consistent, constant investment of time, energy, effort, and intentionality every single day to do its best for you. Search does not. Search requires regular and consistent intentionality and investment, but it doesn't have to happen at the frenetic pace of social media. And I am sick and fucking tired of digital marketers selling social media programs as the first stop for new and struggling businesses, especially when those businesses do not yet have sales. Just like we talked about way back in season 2, in sales versus networking and deciding which one to do first, I have some forgiveness to ask for here. I have some eating my words to do here. Because early in my career, when I made a living off of training people how to use LinkedIn and Facebook for their business, I taught people that that was their primary vehicle, that's where they should be. And at that time, it was true. But I helped to contribute to this idea that Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram are more important than your website, are more important than your search strategy. And that's simply not the case for business. I've seen this over and over and over again. So if you're building a business that you would like to run in a sustainable way where you're not constantly having to launch or create content every day or run after it constantly on a hamster wheel that feels like it never ends, then you've got to break the chains of a social media driven business and ramp up your search strategy. One of the things I always look for clients whose business is social media driven right now is what's happening in their business so that they can understand how and when to make those changes. So a lot of our clients at this point actually come to us with fairly substantial social media followings where they're getting most of their business from launching and selling in social. And that means they're doing things like creating videos and quote cards and making really thoughtful posts every single day or most days. And those interactions in Instagram Live or Facebook Live or YouTube Live are gold for them and it sells for them. And when they get closer to launch, they go live more and they produce more stuff and they interact more. And then they wonder why they're exhausted and rebelling against those interactions and wanting to go on vacation for a month and not open their Instagram account. Because it's exhausting. Because this idea that we can constantly be on and responsive is not a business model. Most of the social media influencers that I know have failed to put a business model. Most of the social media influencers that I know have failed to put a business model underneath their personality model. Because they've been taught by digital marketers and online trainers and coaches that their personal brand is the only thing that matters. They've been taught that if you build a personal brand, you have a business. And this is simply not true. Nothing is more common for me at this point than to have people come to me that have strong and substantial personal brands, particularly in social media, that do not have a sustainable business model where they know that their employees will be paid next month if they don't launch. That is the power of a search first. That is a power of a copy first strategy. You get off of the hamster wheel and into sustainability in your marketing because you put in effort now that builds in value over time. You put in effort now that means you don't have to make a YouTube video or an Instagram live video next week. You put in effort now that means when you need a 2-week break or even a 30-day break, your website still produces leads and sales like clockwork because search builds in value over time. And you have an opportunity to access more clicks. Think about it this way. The reason that 53% of traffic that is trackable comes from organic search and only 5% from social is what we're there to do. How do you use it? When you're using your phone to search for something in a Google search, because Google has 92% of all search traffic, when you're using your phone to search for something, you want an answer from a website. You want a YouTube video or a Google search or an article or a product to buy. You're there to go to a website. When you're on social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, you're not there to go to a website and buy something. You're there to interact. Even when you go there to ask for recommendations because you're thinking about buying something, you're there to interact. You're there to be in community, even if that being in community is sometimes a little bit dysfunctional. So it takes a lot of work from a marketer to get you off of that track and onto their website. And the other thing is how those algorithms work. So social media prioritizes freshness above almost anything else. What's new, what's in the moment, what's coming now. Versus search prioritizes authoritativeness around most things. Of course, there are in the moment type searches, things around news or current events or things like that. But for the most part, you're going to win in search with the most authoritative and engaging pieces of content, not the freshest. Think about it this way. When's the last time that you spent a lot of time, maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours, Lord help me, I hope not more, producing a piece of social media content? I know people who do it all the time, especially some of the most beloved and most followed people. They pay teams to craft these things. And that post, even if it's really popular for a few days, then it's gone, forgotten. It's exactly the opposite in search. In search, when you take the time to craft something really well, it can continue to get traffic forever and ever. Well, maybe not forever, but for a really long time. I'll give you an example of this. I used to work with a company that was in a space that didn't have a lot of information about their products online yet. And so we created a glossary of all the terms and shapes and sizes and ways that this product could be put together. It was about 20,000 words long, which is the equivalent to a small book. It lived all on one page and it was beautifully designed. This project cost about $15,000 in 2011 to put together and represented 3 or so months worth of work. It is 2021, 10 years later. And the last time I checked in with this company, that piece of content is still getting over 1,000 hits a week. 10 years later, that piece of content is still getting over 1,000 hits per week because authoritativeness and compellingness and time on page, those are things that matter in search. When was the last time you saw a social media post that was 10 years old getting any attention, unless it was something terrible that somebody said that's getting them canceled? It just doesn't happen. So from a business model standpoint, it's absolutely critical that you shift, if you're not already, to investing into search. It's absolutely critical if you want sustainability in your marketing that you get off the tap of social media driven business models. Social media driven business models are very difficult to maintain. Social media business models will always require the thought leader, influencer type personality to be engaged with them, which means you never get to turn off. And this is why I see my clients constantly, they end up with me because they're experiencing burnout. And we haven't even talked about the other side of this dark shadow of a social media driven business model, which is businesses who put so much time, energy, and effort into social media for no return. Because they're there with the mistaken idea that if they post about their business, that's all that it takes. When the truth is that the most successful companies in social media, whether it's individuals or larger companies, are successful because of their engagement levels. They put a lot of time, energy, and effort into engaging with other people. This is one of the things that even Gary Vee is honest about. He'll tell you to put your whole damn life on your social media feed as your strategy for building your business. But he'll also say over and over again, maybe not as much today as he did years ago, but over and over again, that the secret sauce of social media driven brands is engagement. It's interacting with other people, not posting your own shit. And so many businesses that really have very limited marketing budgets, they pay out $1,000 or $2,000 or even $3,000 or $4,000 a month to a social media agency to post things for them and run ads, but nobody is interacting, and then they wonder why they get nothing from it. Where that few $1,000s a month invested in SEO would have return almost guaranteed when done with a copy-first strategy, utilizing some of the techniques that we've talked about in previous episodes. Sustainability in your business model in a 2021 world is best done with an SEO-based marketing strategy, which means you consider and invest in search engine optimization and search engine marketing before investing in social media. Now, there's a few things that have to be in place in order for you to do that, and we've talked about them at length in previous episodes. We've talked about you need to have a website that functions like a salesperson. You need to have great copy. You need to have looked at things like site speed and schema and all of those things in order to make search really perform well. But all of those investments are much more worthwhile than investing in lots of social media work when it's just going to go up in smoke the day that you decide you need a month off. So, I want to compel you not to quit social media, but to start moving towards an SEO-first strategy, to start moving towards a search-first strategy, because I am here for you to talk about sustainability. We've been talking about that since season 1. Because y'all, I'm tired, and I know you're tired And part of the reason why you're tired is because you think that your business model is that you have to be on Instagram all day, or you have to be on Instagram even every day, or you have to hire someone to do it for you who doesn't really have your voice, so it's not going to be great anyway. And I'm not saying that all social media management is bad. There are some social media managers that I think are fantastic, and I would strongly recommend that brands at certain stages work with them. But for small and micro businesses that only have a few $1,000s, I'd say like in a 2021 world, less than $10,000 a month to invest, that investment is usually best served in SEO and maybe some strategic advertising over social media posting, over social media videos. And if you really want to make videos, I'd love to see you make them on YouTube first, not Instagram. So why am I saying this to you when it feels like every other marketer in the world is telling you to get on to Instagram or TikTok or something like that? Well, there's a couple things I want you to think about that we've talked about before. One is that you need to look at when that digital thought leader, in quotations if you're not watching the video, built their following. Because things that were true when they built their following are not necessarily true today. For example, if you're an Amy Porterfield or a Marie Forleo of the world who built your Facebook and YouTube audiences back in 2012 to 2014-ish or 2010 to 2014-ish, then what was true for you is simply not true now. And it's fairly disingenuous to tell people that they can build their brand the same way you did. Because at that moment, social media was kind of a wide open field. It was like Facebook was the primary, a little bit of Twitter, right? Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, not quite Instagram yet, but soon to come Instagram. All of these places ran on fairly purely organic feeds, which meant that if you had engaging content, not even like amazing engaging content, but mildly engaging content, you could show up to lots of people and get lots of traction with very little effort. You just had to try. But as those platforms grew and as their algorithms shifted to prioritize keeping people on platforms so that they could sell ads to them, they became less and less friendly to organic posts from businesses, intentionally so, to the point that particularly Facebook and Instagram have what I tell my clients become basically pay-to-play platforms, which means you have to buy some form of advertising to be sustainably successful. It doesn't mean that there aren't flukes. It doesn't mean you can't win the lottery. It doesn't mean you can sometimes do really well. But to have sustainable success on those platforms, meaning you're getting a predictable amount of traffic and leads to your website or a predictable amount of sales through a direct sales feed on those platforms, you have to invest in advertising, because that's what those platforms are there for. And that's simply the way it is now. Google has advertising, it's true. And you can get more from a Google search, that's part of SEM, if you invest in advertising. But what is still true about Google is that the thing that keeps their business model the strongest is as many people coming and searching as possible, which means having the highest quality search results is the number one priority. So those high quality search results mean that it's a little bit easier to win. Now, it isn't perfect. The idea that search is a democratic process, the idea that search levels the playing field isn't true. Bigger sites still have a leg up over smaller sites just by nature of being bigger. Older sites have a leg up over newer sites just by nature of being older. Sites that can afford to pay for technology that makes them faster or sleeker or to pay for technologists like developers or like people like me that make them faster or sleeker, they're going to get priority. So it's not true that it's a level playing field, but it's a more level playing field in 2021 than social media. And when you can get traction with your keyword clusters, your topic clusters, that's something that you can much more easily maintain than keeping a social media audience engaged when you're not around. As you've probably been told by some digital marketer, you really have to make video on most of today's social media platforms to stay successful. That's also not true in search. There are plenty of things you can do besides video. Now, I want to talk for a moment about the difference between SEO and SEM, although we have a whole episode on this, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. SEO stands for search engine optimization, which is the organic results. And it happens in two ways. The actual listings where, there's a blue link and there's a description of what the link is underneath it. Those are organic listings. And then rich snippets, which are when a Google search answers questions within the search box or gives a definition or offers a story or a video or a recipe right there in the search box. Both of those are part of an organic strategy. And you can go back and listen to our episodes on websites, look for links for them in the show notes to get more information on that. SEM is the total search engine marketing footprint. So in the old days, we used to think of SEM as just the paid version of SEO, but today I think of it as marketing the whole search. So the whole screen. On a mobile device, this will include things like location-based search, ads, maps, and regular organic listings. On a desktop device, it's going to include some local, although not quite as much, ads, organic, and schema. Then you also have images and YouTube, because yes, YouTube is owned by Google, that play into this total search engine marketing picture. So it's not just metadata and alt text on pages on your website anymore. There's lots of other pieces to a search engine marketing strategy, like stories and YouTube videos and image search. And for those of you who live anywhere where you're interested in having clients from your local area, even if you're a totally online business, local search should also be a part of your strategy. So for example, let's say that you live in New York City or Hartford or Orlando or any big metropolitan area. You really should be invested in local search as well, because there's a lot of opportunity that's easier to get when a location gate is thrown around it. So there's so much more that you can do in search engine first strategies than there was 10 years ago. It's about so much more than backlinks and metadata, although those are important. What I want you to know about moving to a search first strategy in 2021 is that it's not like the old days. If you tried search back in like 2012 or 2015 and you thought it was all about like long form essay blog posts, that's not the search of today's world. Things like images with alt tags and visual aesthetics and depth of writing are all things that are being measured by algorithms in different ways now. There are things like stories that Google is experimenting with. YouTube videos matter. So you can use your keywords in images and videos and things like that that make a much more dynamic experience. So if you're thinking of SEO as just like blog posts with keywords stuffed into them, that's not what this is. It's a totally dynamic marketing strategy that builds over time instead of disappearing every day. That's the difference. Now, I want to say one final word. If you are making a transition from a social first to an SEO first strategy, think of it like in the episode where we talked about sales versus networking. If you are getting all of your sales from social media, you need to make a transition, not a definitive switch. You can't just turn the switch off, which means you invest a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more in a search engine marketing strategy until eventually your SEM strategy is bringing in enough business that you can start to ramp down your SEO. So unfortunately, you don't get to just jump ship overnight. Now, for most companies that already have a website up and running that just needs optimization, and they have a fair bit of brand, so meaning they're getting sales in social in a consistent way, this process takes about 6 months when intentionally focused on. Again, this process takes about 6 months when intentionally focused on. So it's not an automatic switch. Now, if you're in a very competitive industry, let's say you are a coach or a digital marketer, the process might look more like a year to 18 months if you're very competitive. The great thing about coaching, though, is I got to tell you, for all that are coaches out there, most coaching companies are not invested in a search first strategy. They've bought hook, line, and sinker the digital marketing Marie Forleo world of social media first. So it's not as competitive as you think if you really come in and put the work into it. If you are a newer brand and or not mature in social media, you can make that transition a little faster. You can start with search first, knowing that if you need immediate sales, just like I told you need to sell, not network more, you need to sell more. And direct sales is still best done through one-to-one interactions on social media because it's going to take a little while to build up that traffic to your website. So it may be that you stop posting so much on social, but you spend 20 minutes every day interacting and save your best content to use in search. Or I don't want to say save because you can use it both places. But the point that I'm trying to make is it's not an on-off switch. It's an on-ramp to a more sustainable strategy over time. And once you shift your focus and intentionality, it takes most companies 6 to 18 months to make that transition fully, where their social media becomes a nice to have or an added bonus, not a requirement to keep their business model running. It's why we don't usually work with startups anymore. We usually work with more mature brands because we need to work with brands that have funding where they can invest in something they want for the future because that transition doesn't happen immediately. Now, I'm not going to say that sometimes you don't get lucky. Sometimes we've had companies come in and like the first post that we put out hits really well and their search strategy takes off immediately, but that's not most. Most, it's a slow build over time, over typically 6 to 18 months. But what happens in that time is their entire business is transformed because they've built sustainability into the marketing strategy. And when the marketing strategy is sustainable, chances are pretty good that the rest of the business will be too. Because think about it. The thing that stresses most of us out the most is making sure that we have money in the bank. And if we've taken care of that, everything else becomes a lot easier. I'm not going to say that all your problems go away. I'm in a moment right now where I'm learning that all the business you need coming in, there can still be lots of internal things that need to be handled in order to make the business sustainable. But for most of us, sustainability in our marketing is the first place we need to look in order to avoid burnout and to have a business model that works and to be sustainable and able to take a deep breath. So I've been talking to you over the last couple of weeks about a copy-first strategy, and that copy-first strategy I would love to see be in service of search, not social. Let me know what you think about this topic. I am quite certain it will cause a little bit of a stir, and I want to just wrap it up by saying I am not telling you to quit social media. I'm not telling you that social media does not have a place in a business marketing strategy. What I'm telling you is that over time, search engine marketing, search engine optimization is more sustainable to a business than a social first strategy. Let me know what you think. I'll see y'all next week.